Hello, and welcome again to Scans Here to Help podcast. I have the luck again to interview again San Juanita Guerra. We familiarly call her SJ at SCAN. And so then in the past, we talked about the program, lunch program. Today, we're going to continue talking about lunch, but specifically to some of the services that SJ wants to highlight. And you want to introduce yourself a little
Of
bit?
course not. Of course not. Hello, everybody. My name is San Juanita Guerra. Yes, everybody calls me SJ, so please do. And so I am a parent educator, community trainer, and mental health consultant for Border Project Launch, which is one of our federally granted programs here at SCAN under SAMHSA. And we focus on the overall wellness of young children. We work with children 0 to 8. We have multiple services within that program. And so we are able to provide different forms of support and intervention to the young children as well as support for their caregivers. And so today, I am very, very appreciative for the opportunity to come and talk a little bit more in depth. I know last time that I was on the podcast, we talked in general about SCAN, about a Border Project Launch and all the services that we provide. But today we want to do a deeper dive into some of the prevention programs that we have when it relates to positive parenting and why that's important. So we do have 2 services that we provide that are very, very wonderfully designed. They're evidence-based, they're free, and we really, really encourage parents of young children to take advantage of these services because it's really eye-opening what you can walk away with from these parenting sessions.
Can I share one of my frustrations with you?
Yes, of course.
Well, I don't know if it's a frustration, but one of the things that I wish our community, and I don't want to sound negative at all, on the contrary, but we have a lot of services. I'm not saying only SCAN, but in general in the community about how to help kids develop healthily, especially emotionally and socially. And a lot of the focus is on physical health, but emotional and social development, a lot of times it's not addressed. And one of the things that we have these incredible programs that can be really, really important and impacting the mental health of children at this age. Prevention at the early years, in this case 0 to 8, is extremely important in terms of brain development and how this child is going to be later on. So my frustration is that, or let me phrase it in a positive way. My wish, my hope is that people will become more aware of the needs of little children, babies and toddlers and preschoolers, and would want to be interested in getting the information so they can impact their kids and not wait until they're like 10, 11, 12, which is a lot more difficult to undo a lot of the things. So simple things like structuring, I'm sure you're going to talk about different things that they can do early on can create a really positive relationship with the children that it can eventually lead to really a healthy development. So then, so I'm sorry that it's just that I have something that I wanted to get out of my chest.
No, I think that's something that especially any parent of any children of any age can probably agree with you and relate to that. We need to put the same emphasis we put on children's physical health in terms of, a child gets sick, we run to the pediatrician and
Mhm.
get them screened and identify what's wrong, and then we pursue treatment. Should be the same thing, right? So that's
Exactly.
another big focus of our program is that early identification, early detection,
Mhm.
so that if we can intervene early and prevent greater things from evolving, why wouldn't we go in that direction,
Exactly.
right? Why would we allow something to snowball into something that could be either very difficult
Mhm.
to undo or to treat, or nearly impossible to, right? Especially if especially when children already reach adolescence and things like that, which can be a
Gotcha.
very,
Yes.
very complicated stage. I'm sure we can all think back to our adolescence year and they're so difficult. But if we could have, maybe identified certain things. And I think we're in a very, very privileged era, you could say, when it comes to identifying early, because not only do we now know more in terms of early child development, we know more in terms of these early childhood disorders. We know how to identify them better. And also, I think because of programs like ours and because of a lot of information and education that's out there, I'm going to give a little credit to the caregivers that they are becoming more open
Good.
to that. Yes, do we still encounter caregivers that it's challenging, because as a parent I can only imagine it being very difficult to accept, my
Mhm.
child may be autistic, my child may have ADHD. What does that mean for our family?
Mhm.
What does that mean for the
Yeah.
child's potential in the future? It's scary stuff for a parent, right?
Yes.
But what I always tell parents is information is power. If you have information, if you have a diagnosis, now you know what you're dealing with. Now you can
Yeah.
understand your child better and have a better bond with them because you can relate to them on their level. And then obviously also you can now reach out for the proper services that could be of use for the child as well as for the rest of the family. So really, in a nutshell, that is our goal
Yeah.
here when it comes to Project Launch, is really providing caregivers as well as educators that support of early identification, early intervention.
Yeah, I think that the earliest that we can address it, the better the outcomes are going to be. So maybe anything around autism spectrum disorders,
Mhm.
any delays in development, hyperactivity, difficulty
Mhm.
uh, complying with commands with parents, etc. Those things can be addressed,
Mhm.
but also not necessarily the program is for kids that already have some kind of problem, right? Which we want to target those kids because those are particularly at risk. But also, if you have a healthy child, then please also come and get this wonderful information
Mhm.
that is related to positive parenting, right? You want to,
Positive parenting. And that's really also the route we want to go, right? If we can prevent instead of having to intervene or treat, then let's prevent, right?
yeah.
Let's put our focus on prevention. And yes, we are today. I really want to address, especially the parents who might say, oh, well, my child doesn't have any type of disorder or anything. No, but we may be entering an era, especially when children enter toddlerhood and things like that,
Mhm.
where they have more awareness. Their intelligence is definitely broadening, and they're experimenting with the world around them. Where we enter discipline issues, right? And that's
Yeah.
where this positive parenting concept comes into place, and positive discipline as well. So that is something that I want to touch on today. What is positive parenting and what is positive discipline, and distinguishing between disciplining our children in a positive way versus punishing our children when they get out of line, right?
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with how the relationship and communication will continue to grow between that child and that parent, and then what we will see in that child in the future,
Yes.
right? So that's really the focus of today, and we have two services that focus on that. And I'm just, as a parent of a toddler myself, I'm so excited that these services are in our community, because I often talk to fellow moms and fellow dads, and I tell them about our services, and they're like, wow, I could really use that,
Mhm.
because lately whatever command I give my 4-year-old, it falls on deaf
Yeah.
ears. What's happening? Where am I going wrong? Um, and so it's incredible how many times parents' actions are well intended, but they backfire on us because it's not the best approach. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about um, the relationship between caregivers and children, in the sense that sometimes there are things that are developmentally appropriate and the parent views them as problematic.
Mhm.
One of them, and it can be different ones, right? It can be, for example, 2-year-olds are really active and they explore, and it's just normal that they tend to do that,
Mhm.
and how parents can allow them to explore without thinking that they're being mischievous, that they're doing, trying to do something,
Mhm.
that is bad. That's one example. The other one, it can be temper tantrums that are extremely healthy for kids because it helps them then develop the skills to begin regulating and managing their emotions, but we tend to instead escalate it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so then
Yes.
how can we help parents understand that some things are really normal?
Mhm.
And because if we reinforce certain behaviors in kids that may not have a disorder,
Mhm.
then things are going to get bad later on.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Especially dealing with defiance. So, and then resentment can grow from the child to the parent, and vice versa. So that would be, focusing on the topic of positive parenting. It's what you just said, Mr. Flores. It's understanding why they behave the way they do, right? If we can understand our children a little better, then we know where they're coming from and we know how to respond then to the
Yeah.
behavior. So let's take a temper tantrum, for example, which we refer to as a dysregulation. And when that typically happens is because a child is trying to express something. And so, and they don't know how to, either because they haven't developed their speech that well. So we do see a connection between speech delays and dysregulation. So that's one thing we want to look into. And speech delays are common. They're very normal. Every child is different. Some children start talking, at 1.5, and other kids, they're almost 4 and we're still dealing. So, but that doesn't mean we can't, intervene and give them that little extra help, right? We
Yes.
have a lot of services now here in the community. The schools have specialists that work with children and the development of their speech. So that's one thing to look out for is there a speech delay and my child is trying to express and they get so frustrated. So they throw themselves on the floor and start
Yeah.
screaming and crying. And then we get frustrated because it's like, I don't understand you. What are you trying to tell
Yes.
me? And it's just this negative energy bouncing off of each other,
Yes.
right? Instead, if I can say, okay, my kiddo's 2.5, their speech not fully developed, but I know they're trying to express so much. Oh, okay, I get it. Let me try and guide my child through
Yes.
that, right? So that's positive parenting. It's really understanding and diving into what stage is my child at, who is my child, right, in terms of personality and temperament and development. And then, okay, how do I best respond to this? One, to support the child and help them develop and grow healthily. But the other two is for the parents' own mental health as well, because
Yeah.
we're only human. We get frustrated, we get tired, and then here come the yells, here come the screams, here come the what, I can't deal with this right now. Go to your room, and that's very dismissive to the child,
Yes.
right? So one for example, one thing that I practice in my home with my child is if she does have a dysregulation, I ignore the behavior, but not the child.
Mhm.
There's a trick to that. And it's, I see you're frustrated. I'm sorry you're frustrated. The answer is still no, you can't have a snack right now. Because that's typically what we fight over, snacks. And I say, when you are ready, mommy will be over here ready
Yeah.
to play with you. And in doing that, what we're really training our children to do is what you mentioned, for them to self regulate.
Yeah.
And allow me to take this a little bit further in terms of self-regulation. I always ask, they say, oh, my child this, and they always have tantrums. I said, let me ask you this. Have you ever had an adult who goes from 0 to 100 in terms of emotions? And they're like, yeah, my brother or whoever. And I said, they probably didn't master self-regulation as a
Yeah.
child because they're not able to really do that check-in of their emotions and then say, okay, I need to either relax, calm down, let that one go. And so, if we can provide that for our children,
Yeah.
what a life skill for our kids to possess as they continue to develop and grow.
Well,
Right?
I mean, I'm just I'm excited about talking about this. That when we talk about regulation of emotions, the kids need to learn from somebody.
Mhm.
So you become, as a caregiver, the co-regulator with the child. So what SJ was talking about in terms of how you respond, and she described how you respond, you have to respond in a firm but calming manner. So then the child can be attuned to your emotions
Mhm.
and begin developing that. So you are the primary role model. I mean,
Yes.
how you address that, you can easily escalate, right?
It can
Child is
easily
just a temper tantrum, you
escalate.
can say, stop it, whatever,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
it's not a big fight.
We actually refer to that in one of our curriculums as the escalation trap, where you yell and you yell and you yell, and it's not till you absolutely lose it or yell really loud or threaten the child that the child responds,
Yeah.
right? We shouldn't have to get to that with our children. They're our children. Let's talk here. And so, yes, absolutely, we are their example to follow. So if a child grows up in a household where they were just yelled at to get them to do things, that is how the child will then respond,
Exactly.
and that is how the child will then deal with their future relationships, right? I always ask parents, I tell them, have you ever been in a relationship where you tell your significant other, why can't you talk to me about your feelings or how you're feeling? I said, I can assure you it's because maybe as children they weren't allowed that opportunity. With children, sometimes we tell them, oh, you shouldn't be crying over that, that's not something to be mad about, you're exaggerating. Boys don't cry, this kind of stuff that we tell our kids. But then it's like they grow up
Yeah.
and they have a very difficult time with expression. And so I always wonder when I meet people like that, it's like I wonder if as a child they were just not given that opportunity, they were just shut down with their emotions, versus their emotions being validated. Like I said, you have a child being dysregulated and say, I get it, I see why you're mad,
Yeah.
you wanted that snack, I said no because we're about to have dinner, I understand.
Yeah.
However, the
And
answer is still no. Yeah.
that is the key thing. I think that
Yeah.
there was, I think it was Dr. Landry that had this technique where you begin with empathy first. You say things like, I know you're mad.
Mhm.
So then that helps the child identify with emotion. I know you're angry with me. But yeah, you cannot have the snack right now. It's not time to have the snack. So it's just simple things can be really impactful, because you talk about people are not able to express, but in order to express emotion, they need to understand their emotion. They need to be aware of their emotions, so then they can express them in a positive way, hopefully.
And in speaking of being the role model and also being that co-regulator and that coach basically for our kids, is also providing our kids with the words of emotions, right?
Yeah.
So like, I see you're angry. Oh, you're frustrated. Where do you feel it? I
Yeah.
see you're sad. I see you're embarrassed or whatever. It's really providing them also with the words, because if they learn the words, then our goal would be, our hope would be that they would then use their words
Exactly.
instead of dysregulating or throwing things. Or in some cases, we have cases where parents say, well, my child has turned to hitting, hitting me or hitting the teacher, etc. I'm getting complaints. It's like, okay, then let's guide this child to express what they're feeling and be allowed to know that they have the right to feel the way they feel.
Yes.
It's just that it's not okay to
It's
hit, kick.
behavior.
Right, right. Your feelings are fine. It's how you
Exactly.
behaved based on your feelings that is not okay and not acceptable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So so we can say, I know you're mad and you want to hit me, but hitting is not something that you can do here.
Exactly.
Instead of saying, I'm going to hit you back, which reinforces the hitting, because then we're given the idea that violence is the way to accomplish things. But being firm, I tell parents to use a firm voice, not necessarily yell, but a firm voice, meaning I mean business, but I show you empathy, I understand what you're going through, and that helps the child definitely become aware of that. And then they may, when you may see progress after you repeat it several times, you may see things like, Mommy, I feel really angry, right? So then
and now we can go in depth into
Yes.
that. What made you feel really angry, right? And this is where also healthy communication between us and our children begins. So that again, when they get older and they get into those stages where they're a little bit more secretive and they want more privacy, hopefully the communication will still continue to flow, and they will have that trust that they can come to us and we will not get mad at them. We will not be judgmental. We will not put them down when they're trying to involve us in their things, right? Because I remember being, a teenager and me sharing something with my mom, and my mom's, she gets upset, and I said, well, you know what? I'm not going to tell you anything else because you get mad every time I try to share anything with you. That's not what we want to do with our kiddos, right? Sorry, mom. Shout out to my mom. She's probably like, what are you? But and so, and that's another thing. That's another thing. We also, as caregivers, I think one of the things that is very important in prevention and in us practicing positive parenting is really taking a moment to reflect on our own history, right? The way we were raised, the way we were disciplined. We always say, well, I would never do that, mom. And then we find ourselves becoming our moms or our dads, right?
Saying the same things.
Right, saying the same things. And so we really want to take that moment to do that self-reflection and say, oh, am I following the same patterns? Did that work for my parents? Maybe it did. Maybe it won't work with my kid because every child is different. So that is also very important. And then the other thing is remembering to practice what we call positive discipline versus punishment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference between those two. And many of us were raised on punishment, not positive discipline, right? Yeah. And it was very, very acceptable back then.
It was actually encouraged.
It was encouraged, And so, in our culture, we even have a fable, right, which is la chancla, right? So we laugh at those things, but it's reality for a lot of us that were raised or disciplined that way.
Really harshly.
Yeah. So if we can distinguish between those two, and folks watching might be saying, well, what is the difference? Let me give some examples. Punishment would be corporal punishment, so spanking, hitting, that kind of thing. Obviously threats, threatening the child. If you don't do this, I'm going to spank you. If you don't do this, I'm going to lock you in your room. If you don't do this, things like that. And then put downs, putting the child down, right? Making them feel bad about themselves. Like, how could you have been so dumb to do that? That kind of talk. That is punishment. And what typically grows out of punishment, some parents think it develops respect from the child to the parent. But what I have seen is it develops resentment, anger, and as the child gets older, a lot of distance. So there's not that healthy communication. The children start keeping things from the parents, a lot of secrecy, that kind of stuff. Whereas with positive discipline, we see, there is a rule system. Mm-hmm. There is a consequences system. There's a reward system even, right? And it's all with the approaches we were just talking or demonstrating with that empathy. Like, hey, I get it. I get you're mad at me. I didn't, for teenagers, I didn't let you go to the party. I get it. Mm-hmm. I was a teenager once. I wanted to go to all the parties, but, it's not safe, whatever, right? Yeah. The answer is still no. I'm so sorry. If you're mad at me, I get it. But my job as your parent is to protect you, right? So you, again, empathizing with their feelings and letting them know, hey, I know where you're coming from. I was there too once. I get it. I've been angry too. I've been sad too. I've been broken up with too, but let's also look at, what we can do, right? And what my duty is to do as your parent, as your caregiver, right? And so that's what positive parenting and positive discipline is really coming with these very different approaches. And for those of us, again, that might have been raised in a very different household, it may require a complete change of mindset, right? Really focusing on that.
Believe me, one of the areas that I struggled with when I was doing therapy with parents is changing the perception of their children, teaching them techniques that are based on science, because it's so hard to get rid of the old habits of yelling, putting down, hitting, because they think these are effective, even though they're not showing any results. And many times that's the reason why they show up at our offices later on. I have seen also many cases where the child comes and they do really well in school, they regulate it in other settings, they leave them with grandma, no problem, leave somebody else, no problem. But at home is the issue. So a lot of this, I'm not saying all of them, but many of these have to do with the relationship with parent and child that they have developed over the years that has been reinforced again and again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. Children respond to us, you may call it our vibe, our energy, our attitude, our approach. They definitely feed off of that. And sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes we hear cases where it's like, well, at home he does pretty well, but at school, and it's like, and that's why we also love working with educators, because then it's like, hey, if we can work with teachers also in terms of like,
Exactly.
hey, let's give you some support, let's give you some tips over here in terms of how to respond to certain behaviors, we may see the child behaving a little bit better in the classroom. And so, yes, absolutely, children completely feed off of what we're giving them.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
then I just want to mention briefly that our intent with the lunch program is not only to impact families but also systems. So then
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you brought it up, SJ, in terms of how teachers respond to kids. Sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
can be we can really help them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we do some kind of training that we
Yes.
teach, especially childcare centers,
Mm-hmm.
on how to use basic what we call the
Yes.
pride skills, right? Still,
Yes, and so we have the care training, which is child adult relationship enhancement training. It's free, and we provide it in a 4 hour training. And yeah, it's just basically, and it can be any caregiver. It doesn't just have to be educators or teachers, but it can be any caregiver. Parents have attended these as
yeah,
well, and it gives folks that foundation, those basic skills to be able to then apply those responses to the children at home or in whatever setting you find yourself. And it's just incredible how folks walk away from that training really
yeah.
enlightened, because they say, I had never thought of it that way.
Mhm.
And I've been doing this over and over. No wonder I'm not getting any results, or I'm not
Exactly.
getting anywhere with this kiddo. And so it can be really, really helpful. And so we have other trainings for caregivers as well.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we need to talk about triple P
Yes,
and
because we
all
have
that.
so many other services that can definitely be really helpful tools for folks that might be saying, "Ah, I'm just so frustrated. I don't know how to, approach certain situations with my child. They always get so dysregulated. They're not listening. They're not minding. Any command I give falls on deaf ears." And so we get a lot of those
Yeah.
really frustrated caregivers. Mhm.
Yes. One of the things that we want to, at least I want to emphasize, is that parenting is very difficult and very complex.
Mhm.
So the least thing that I want to do today with SJ here is to come across as we being negative with parents who lose it with their kids. On the contrary, we know that it's tough being a parent, and sometimes we mess up. Um,
Mhm.
but that shouldn't be a reason why we cannot, learn new things, practice. Even sometimes when we learn something new, we don't necessarily do it all the time. So it requires again and again and again
Mhm.
to actually become good at it. So we want to make sure that that we're aware that this is a tough job to raise children.
The toughest job, I would say. The
And
greatest
yeah,
responsibility somebody can have is raising a child. Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, and we don't learn. We just learn by doing, which and what our parents did. Uh, they raised us, and I have my own stories that
For another episode.
yeah, another episode.
Yeah.
Anything else that we didn't cover today? We talked about safe. You want to talk about safe care, or did you include it
Yeah,
already?
Triple P and Safe Care. I'll start with Safe Care because this is for the really, really little ones. Safe Care is for caregivers that have children 0 to 5 or expecting moms. We love working with expecting parents because, especially if you're a first time parent, because you are so excited, but at the same time, it can be a very scary situation. Like, okay, I'm going to come home from the hospital with this baby. What do I do now? Right. So, Safe Care is a home based, evidence based curriculum that our parent educator provides in the home. And it really gives caregivers a lot of information, a lot of tips related from safety to proper ways to handle certain situations at home with the children. And it's that emphasis on those really, really tender years, right? That very,
Mhm.
very start. And so we really encourage caregivers to do that, to sign up for that program. Currently, we are taking new cases. Our parent educator is ready to go out there and be able to provide that information. We do give small incentives as well each time the parent graduates from each module, because there are several modules in there. And we give incentives related to the topic, so if it's safety. So, for
Mhm.
example, the locks for the cabinets or things like that. And again, it's home based, so it's from the convenience of your home. Obviously, if the person feels comfortable allowing the parent educator to come into their home. And then, of course, we assess the situation because if parent or child could benefit from other services that are within our program or in other programs, then obviously we want to be able to identify and refer folks to the services that they may be in need of.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
great. Yeah.
absolutely. Mhm.
Yeah, and maybe that you are having difficulties with parenting. I don't know what your situation may be. Maybe you have several kids, you have to deal with work and other issues that come in our lives. We also have services for you to help you cope with those things besides the actual skill building things.
Yes, and then we do have parenting classes through Triple P, which is another evidence-based curriculum. That one consists of 5 standalone topics, what I like to refer to as universal topics,
Mhm.
topics that I think any caregiver with children 0 to 8 can relate to, for whether it's dealing with disobedience, who's not, tell me a parent who's not dealing with that, or managing fighting and aggression. We see a lot of aggression in young children. Again, it can be related to their inability to self-express. Developing good bedtime routines, that is a really
Yeah.
popular topic. You'd be amazed how many caregivers really struggle with the bedtime routine. And I think the biggest struggle that I've come across is parents trying to avoid their children from co-sleeping with them. That's a big one. That's a big one that we see. And then the other topics include like hassle-free shopping. So when you go in public with your kids, we've seen that. We've all been there at Target and we see something. And then hassle-free meal times. How do you deal with kids that they come and pick and then they leave the table, or they're picky eaters, or they just refuse to eat. So these are all universal topics. They're standalone, which means folks can choose
one
with
topic.
topics, or they can do the series of 5.
Mhm.
And again, this is all free. Triple P is for caregivers with children 0 to 8. And again, Safe Care is 0 to 5, those little ones,
Yeah.
and expecting parents as well.
So then people can just call and try to get the information about either Safe Care, Triple P, positive parenting.
Absolutely. And we
and
have different groups depending on why the caregiver is seeking
Okay.
the classes. So, for example, if they're listening to this podcast, or they see our promotions and they say, hey, I'm dealing with some of this stuff, I'd like to take these classes. Okay, we have a group. And then we have groups for moms, for dads. And then we even have special groups for when folks are required to take parenting classes, right? Those are a little bit more extensive and in depth. And so we do have special groups for folks that might be CPS or probation referred as well. And so we're able to serve all caregivers, and that's regardless of whether folks have, for the Triple P, for the parenting classes, that's regardless of whether they have the children in their custody or not.
Okay.
Because sometimes parents say, well, I don't have my kids with me. Do I qualify for Triple P and for the parenting classes? Yes. For Safe Care, they do have to have the child. Yes. Now, another convenient thing about the Triple P classes and parenting classes is that it started with COVID, but now we've seen that it's so convenient for folks. We continue to offer them via Zoom.
Nice.
So caregivers that enroll can log in from wherever they are at, as long as they have the Zoom app on their phone or device, and they have a strong enough internet connection. And so that is super convenient, because we have caregivers joining us during their lunch hours, or I've seen caregivers who put the class, and I see moms cooking or dads doing other things. And so again, it's makes it really, really convenient.
Yes.
And of course, folks feel very comfortable doing it that way. So they're really, and again, it's free. So whoever wants to register, give us a call, reach out to us. And again, so that we can be able to provide you with these skill sets, these tips. And at the same time, if there's other needs, we'll assess that as well and be able to link families to services.
Yes, well, this is wonderful. And so they can call immediately. Where are you located?
Our location, because of course SCAN's very big, got locations all over the city. We are located in Springfield Plaza, which is off the corner of Springfield Avenue and Village Boulevard towards the Del Mar area. So our actual physical address is 6826 Springfield Avenue. And we have suites 203 and
I
204A
see.
for project launch.
And let me ask just Liz, are you going to put the phone number there on the screen? Okay, so we're going to have the phone number on the screen and the address. Most likely, maybe she's doing that right now.
Yeah, you have our
And you
contact
have the
information
contact.
below, and that way you can reach out to us. Many times, families come to us because they were referred by their child's school or their child's pediatrician, but no referral is necessary. Folks can just call the office, and it's what we call a self referral. And then we get you linked to the service that you're
Yeah.
requesting, and somebody will be in contact with you
Sure.
shortly to get you registered.
Yes, please contact us. These services are extremely important and valuable for you as a parent. I know that you have dreams about your kid as they grow up. What would you want them to be? The time to act is now. You're pregnant, the time to act is now. If they're newborn, it's now. You know, as early as you can begin, we shouldn't waste any time. That little brain is developing connections. It is important that you are the primary instrument to help them develop healthily, to help them develop in a way where learning is going to become easy, when ability to focus later on in life is easy, where they can develop positive relationship with others. It's all connected with that interactions that you have day to day with your children. But there are specific skills that we don't necessarily learn. Sometimes they're counterintuitive to what comes natural to you. There was a famous psychologist that said that all parents love their kids, and what parents don't need is only is love. They also need skills, and that's what we want to do.
We know you've got the love.
Yes.
We're here to provide the skills.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.